welcome to Toon Boom's ATE 2022. My name is Mel, short for Mariev, and today we will be speaking to David Liu on the topic of anime outside of the traditional pipeline. So,
Hello,
greetings,
hello.
David.
Greetings. Greetings from the south.
Yeah, yeah. So, little classic introduction. Could you tell us what you generally do in the art platform, and what is your favorite anime, or favorite anime of the moment? I know it's hard to choose.
It is very hard to choose. Well, that's an easy one on my mind is definitely Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust is my favorite sort of watched animated film right now.
Yeah,
Mainly because of the art and animation style and kind of it's been good reference for an unannounced sort of work that's in pre-production.
ooh,
So I've been watching that a lot. But yeah, and as far as the animation and I guess art industry goes, I generally do anything and everything that I can get my hands on. Started off with 2D animation, and then it became concepts for video games, and then came key art, and then back to animation, and then it just kind of jumps all over the place. So I think primarily I work more in the game industry than animation industry, both 2D animation.
very very interesting to hear. And it seems by the description that you're pretty flexible, and that you can fit into many like job requirements. Um, I guess it comes from working on many different smaller projects. So you must switch from like character design, sometimes animation, to FX animation. Um,
Yes, it's it's I guess I definitely a chameleon of sorts with different art styles, and yeah, it's been a good way to sort of get thrown into the deep end. Um, like so if you need to draw a cartoon character in a certain style, you have to try to adapt to it. Had to learn to draw environments and backgrounds that way too. So you just get thrown into the deep end and just do your best. Learn, study. Uh, yeah, it's been really good. I definitely was telling someone before that with my main gig, I started off with the Odd Gentleman, and their art style was very different than the sort of retro 80s and 90s anime aesthetic that most people on the internet have seen me do. And that was mainly because I would sort of take this art style that inspired me when I was younger, and use that as my muse after work hours to just draw retro anime or something inspired by. And that's kind of like how the character Space Maria was born, just by sort of being myself and exploring that venue.
yeah, just proves that it's important and healthy to be
Yes.
flexible in our styles, because I guess you can even learn and implement different aspects and skills from different styles that you've been working
Hmm.
on.
Yeah, definitely. So it was one thing I also learned a long time ago when I started learning animation. I thought I drew characters really well with faces and eyes and all that stuff, but once you start actually having to animate and rotate faces,
It's so
it
hard.
yeah, it
It's
makes
really
you
hard.
it makes you have to really think about your fundamentals and how your 3D forms are, and it's
You're like, it works from front, it works from quarter front and profile.
uh,
Then you have to do things in between. You're like, huh,
I
a
don't know
little
where it goes.
structural help would help.
I think
Uh,
one of the first things I animated was a girl turning her head, and for some reason I thought I had to animate like every single frame of her head turn. And I just remember that being like 2 days of like headache trying to figure out, I don't know where the eyes go.
I
Maybe
think we've all been there.
I
Oh boy. um, yeah. Can you share one amazing, like positive event that occurred for you this year? Might be
need.
art related,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
yeah.
Um, well, definitely it was probably my biggest project that I worked on so far, which is already hard to believe it's almost the end of the second quarter of the year.
I know.
Is I worked on a promotional animation for the Batman movie.
Ooh,
Um,
that's so cool.
yeah, it was a lot of work. I got really sick in the middle of production of that. I think I had COVID for like 2 weeks,
Were you able
and it
to
was
push the
just
deadlines a little bit, or?
yes, it got
Oh, that's
pushed.
great.
Yeah, it got pushed. It's still we still managed to get it done in about 6 to 8 weeks. Um, and the
Impressive.
work was it was just me doing all the animation, and then I had a background artist who goes by Donnie Durdunkleton on the internet, and he painted all the backgrounds. It was a huge help. Um, his art was great. So yeah, I don't know how he pulled it off, but that was kind of the big exciting thing that we were able to get done this year.
Oh, that's great. And I really like that you could be able to push the deadlines. And I think that's so important, especially in our industry, and for maybe younger folks listening
Mm,
in. Um, it is important to also value like your health. So if you ever have like contracts before pulling three all-nighters, it's always great to ask like, yeah, can we push that a couple of hours? Because sometimes the answer is yes, and you will not kill yourself over a task.
hmm Yeah, and definitely getting older too. So these all nighters
Yeah.
are not as graceful as they used to be in my 20s. I have some younger artist friends in animation industry, and they're used to pulling like two all nighters a week. I'm like, you're crazy, but you're young. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, yeah. When you're just starting out, you're young, okay, but at one
Yeah.
point you have to learn to. I mean, your buddy's gonna tell you anyway. So,
hmm Yep. My
um,
buddy's like, you're done. Sleep.
speaking of younger artists, what got you into the animation industry at first? And what keeps the fire burning? So, what keeps you going, project after project?
Yeah. So my start in 2D animation and just kind of my professional art career kicked off really serendipitously. I was working restaurant back in the 20s, and in my 20s, not the 20s, and I went to a coffee shop after work just to like get some art out of my head. So I brought like a pile of typing paper and a ballpoint pen. I was just like doodling at a coffee shop, and an artist by the name of Evan Cagle saw me drawing, and he walked by a couple of times, just kind of scoping out to see what I was doing. He introduced himself and said that he was working on an animated project, which was a personal one. Um, and at the time, he was I think, a lead or senior animator on the Scanner Darkly film that came out, I think, in the 2000s.
Okay.
Um, so he just wrapped on that, and he was working on a personal animation project. Lo and behold, he saw potential in my artwork, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to learn some animation with me?" I was like, "I've never animated before in my life, but I've always wanted to." So he taught me a bit of it. I think TV Paint was the program, but it was not called TV Paint at the time. I think it was called Mirage Studios or something similar. Um, he taught me sort of the basics of animation. We watched a lot of anime together, looked at a lot of different anime art books, and we were both into the same things. And I remember learning how to draw with a Wacom Intuos that I swear the screen was probably only a little bit bigger than my phone of drawing space. Um, and yeah, learned how to animate a little bit because it was more accessible. Doing paper animation and being able to sort of preview your work with uploading it to your computer and PC back in the day was very difficult and expensive to get a hold of all that materials, or I just didn't know where to look for it. There wasn't any Amazon or anything that was online where you can just Google like animation
Yeah,
starter
for
kit.
reference and to learn animation, it was so hard.
Yes, it was very difficult. I think we used to go to the coffee shops for internet back in the day because it was too expensive for us to afford internet at home. And so we would yeah, it drawing digitally got me learning a bit of the fundamentals, which was sort of what I was talking about earlier with like during that head turn and like learning the hard way of how not to do it. But if I didn't put in that time, I wouldn't have understood how that worked. So yeah, that got me started. What keeps the fire going is definitely good animation. Um, I've spent countless nights, countless sleepless nights, just browsing internet gifs of amazing animators in animation that pops up on Twitter and Pinterest and just Google searches. And yeah, it's just inspiring work, stuff that I want to pour all my time into. But lo and behold, I realistically can't all the time.
Well, most of the time.
Yeah,
Oh, that's pretty cool. So, um, and I guess in the same vein, like for your personal style that you say is very much inspired by 80s anime, um, can you talk a little bit about that? Like how you kind of fell into it, how you keep it growing? Because like drawing exactly like today, so
no,
like it a style always keeps evolving, and
yeah,
yeah, it's easy to say it's 80s anime style, but it's not. It's David's 80s anime style. So
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's entirely well said. Everybody can be inspired by something, but their style is still going to show, regardless of what inspired style they're drawing from.
And it grows.
Yes. Let's see. Um, so I got into anime due to my uncle. He was kind of a gamer and anime nerd back when I was younger, and so he would show up with these VHS tapes of anime he rented from Blockbuster. He said, "Check it out," and some of it was questionable for me to watch at like 12 years old. Um, and I think I was in junior high at the time, and so I just remember watching. I think Ranma One Half was the first thing that made me fall in love with the style, just because of how well they're able to sort of animate movement and bodies and martial arts. Dragon Ball Z was also another one too. But back then, there wasn't any anime that really showed on television. We didn't have cable. The most we had was really, I think, the same dozen episodes of Dragon Ball Z that would show on Saturday morning at like
Yeah, I
seven
think in
thirty.
my childhood it was only like I think like Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, Sakura, like the card
Yes.
captor, and Sailor Moon.
Hmm.
I think were mostly the only one we got
Yeah.
as being young kids.
I remember when Pokemon came out, I made a big deal out of it, not
Oh
because of the
yeah,
game, but because it was like an actual anime that got on like popular kids television, and nobody knew it was anime. They just thought it was that video game cartoon. But there was something different. There's a ton of people that fell in love with it, and I think it was because the style was very different than the programming we got at the time, which was like Tom and Jerry and all the Warner Brothers animated series that were coming out. And so it was a really good contrast, and it was a really exciting time. Um, I still openly didn't really draw anime at school. I would draw it like in my booklets and everything, but it wasn't something that you wear as like a badge of honor like nowadays, which
yeah.
was very interesting and different. Um, so yeah, that was good. It was good to sort of have that. It was always there. I think when I have a bunch of school books, say from high school and college, that are just like 70% notes and then the other 30% are drawings.
Yeah, I think that's common for most of us out there.
Yeah,
um, and speaking of doodling and drawing everywhere, being flexible in style is important, but being flexible in the materials that you use is also very important. And I see that we have Harmony open there. Yay!
yay.
Um, is there some key features or something that are very useful in Harmony that you use when you animate or draw in your different gigs catering to the anime style?
Yeah. So first thing that I found that is just right off the bat, off the top of my head, is just really the index color palettes that you can
Mm-hmm.
import and bring in from different project to different scenes. Helps with the consistency of time, and it's made my life a lot easier if I need to do color adjustments for animation. So if I needed to export something and it was too dark or the contrast needed to be greater because they're too similar, I just need to go in and slide it and then re-export my animation frames. Um, Really, the biggest boon for me is just the layout of the timeline. I think nothing's worse than a confusing timeline. I've always found Toon Boom's timeline to be easiest to read just by being able to do plus and minus and extend frame lengths.
Yeah, and see like
Um,
the thumbnail to see what your drawings are actually like and all
mhm.
that. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it was I mean, like obviously Clip Studio has animation as well, but I've never found it very accessible past the hobbyist sort of aspect. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
good to do a lot of fun personal animations and practice, but if you're going to do production work where you need to export, your animation in different layers for compositing, it's I never found it very accessible, or I hit some sort of wall, and that could be just like a lack of knowledge with using that software, but I'm definitely used to Tumu. I think I used it the most with a project I animated about, geez, how many years? 7 years ago. That I think we were using Toon Boom Animate 3. I
Yeah,
think
that
that
would
was
make
before
sense
Harmony
with the
came.
years.
Yeah, yeah. I think I still have the license for it, but I don't think it's compatible with any software or at least operating systems now. Yeah, that I spent a ton of time in that program. Um, I did a lot of 2D VFX animation for King's Quest that we developed back in the day. Um, and then we also did, yeah, we did that. We did a little bit of a feature animation as well, but that's like an NDA project.
Secrets.
Secrets, old secrets.
Oh, that is really interesting to see all the 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 software changes with the years and yeah, I forgot about Anime 3. I think it's the first Toon Boom software I also used
Yeah,
back
I think I
then.
used one older than that. Maybe it was. Can't remember. I
Maybe
just
Toon Boom
remember
Studio.
anti-aliasing wasn't a big thing for one of them. And my Evan and I were looking at it. We're like, these lines aren't anti-alias. We were trying to figure out why. I think it was like a setup thing. Um, yeah, to go from Mirage, which became TV Paint, to Toon Boom, and just the vector aspect of it made it a ton easier. Like being able to color, um, coloring cell animation is never fun in
Yeah,
whatever software you use.
and
But Toon Boom was
especially,
the easiest.
oh, that's good to hear. But when it comes to cell coloring, it's always a very, very high focus and tedious job
Hmm.
um, in many, many different styles. But especially, I think in a traditional anime style, um, it can get even more work because the I mean, highlights and tones
Hmm.
are put directly in the drawing itself. Like that is something that is one kind of question that our um, followers asked on their socials lately.
Mm.
But people are often wondering like how the highlights and tones are done in a more anime style because there's so many little details
Mm.
to light. So is it a layer you put on top, or is it directly on the drawing? I mean, I know the answer, but like we can just discuss about it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few different approaches. A very sort of art directed color palette with tones for every set of colors already decided is one way to go about it, which is you can get really great dynamic um, animation frames that way just because you've handpicked the color that'll go with this red shirt or character's skin, right? And
Yep.
I do that sometimes when I do just cell style illustration work. But the way that I like going about that is having a lighting layer on its own. So when I import it into After Effects for compositing, I can use different blending styles or use that as a mask, and have that be an overlay for one scene or a multiply for another scene. I can change the color, and change how it interacts with the other colors. Um, and the same thing goes for highlights and second level of shading. And so when it comes to like anime inspired work, the thing that made it stand out the most, besides its animation style from Western style, is the sort
The
of the heavy
special
emphasis
lighting.
on, yes, the lighting, the toning layers are very dense, which are definitely visible in feature films like Vampire Hunter D, which I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But even for them, they found a way to create a character model that had highlights with only one layer of shadow, but it felt like it was 10 times more complicated than than it was. I think mainly just because the line mileage in each cell frame was very dense, and so there was a lot of little intricate sort of hair details and other shading lines. Yeah, so when it comes to doing cell animation work, I like my personal approach is I like approaching lighting after I get my cleans done and on a separate layer. Um, that's the approach I did when I worked with Patrick and Knights of the Light Table for Night Runner. He brought me on to do lighting animation, and I went in after the cleans were done, and I would do my own layer of lighting animation and VFX, um, which I've always found to be easier to work on um, from start to finish, straight through, versus having two big keyframes with a ton of line detail for lighting and toning, and having to try to wrap my brain around uh, animating that in betweens. Um, I don't know if that's the approach that everyone uses, but that's definitely one that's worked best for me. Let's see if there's any other aspects of that. Let's see. Yeah, I'm sure that's pretty much it.
That's really
I
cool.
know I worked with Michael Doig on Starlight Brigade with him in India, and we were trying to wrap our heads around. This is kind of how we started our friendship. He asked me about some cell animation stuff, and we started talking about that. And so yeah, I animate. You guys need help? Just let me know. I have some part time free time. Would love to help out. And it's oh, great. And so we figured out the pipeline that works well with Toon Boom as well as After Effects for working with multiple layers of shading and lighting. And yeah, he was able to work it out with his node magic in Harmony Premium. And so
Yeah,
he would just plug it all in. You just had to have the right layers in a certain way, and then just hit one button, export for After Effects, and it was like down to compositing. Um,
that's really cool.
yeah,
um,
I guess I
I
should do
think
this.
I think we
This
mentioned it a little bit before, but um, when animating or designing, like, do you notice some like key differences between working on a more Western cartoon animation style and a more detailed traditional anime style? Because there's a difference between like the skills and the and the way to animate a Looney Tune cartoons than
mm,
it is to animate on Evangelion, for example. Like
right.
it's animation, but it's so many different little
It's a
skills and
different
aspects
language.
from it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think what I've found more difficult is getting less. I tend to be more rigid in my animation style. It's just weird to think because I my favorite thing to animate is VFX animation. That's always been some for some reason. Every time I stop doing animation and then come back for another work, it's like I've never missed a beat with VFX animation, and I'm somehow able to still feel like I've
Oh,
improved at it.
cool to know that it's really your thing.
Yeah, it's weird. Lighting and VFX animation. Maybe because it's so fluid, but yeah, I've always found it difficult to break out of personal rigidity with doing animation and going into like a very fluid Western style one. And so what ends up happening is it ends up being kind of a blend. Oh yeah, a good
Mm-hmm.
example is that we did a promo animation for Going Under with me and Quinn Takeda, who was fresh out of animation school at the time,
Wow.
and yeah, it was based off of a very stylized game with flat colors. Even the character models, I think, were made out of like primitive shapes, and so we were able to interpret that. We did it all in Toon Boom, which is really cool because we would draw all our line work and all our lighting, but then we would just turn off the lines and export, and it was just flat colors,
Oh, that's
and
so great.
it came out really cool. And even with the little weird ridges that happen when a shape doesn't fill correctly,
Mm-hmm.
it gave it a little bit of texture or tooth because it just looked not too clean. Um, so yeah, that was a cool blend of trying to mix sort of Western style with, I guess, a more rigid anime style, like with focus on like shapes and different rotations versus, I don't know, flat, wobbly smears and other cartoon bits.
I mean, not gonna lie, even when I animate in Toon Boom, like in Harmony, I'll see myself looking at the just the color art, like turning off the line art, and be like, "Oh my god, that looks so cool!" Because the colors are just shapes,
Hmm.
and there's no line to tell them apart. And yeah, it's
I
really
like doing
interesting
that
to be
with
able to do
lighting.
that. Mm-hmm.
I do that with lighting animation. I think there have been a few that I've done with like a sort of shine wipe that goes across the whole thing, and it's just cool to kind of see how well you
Like in the
translated the shape.
Magnum, I think for Magnum Bullet, like there was a lot of shots with like cars and the characters, like
Hmm.
the lighting would go to the beat of the music. That was really interesting.
Yep. Yep.
Pretty cool, pretty cool. And when you draw, like maybe to get a more of a fluid or different style, did you ever notice a
Mm.
difference in the way you draw with the way that you hold your stylus or your pencil or your
I
uh,
yeah.
ballpoint pen
Let's
or
see.
something?
So I did notice. Um, so normally when I hold my pen, I'm left-handed.
Me too.
Yay! So it's lefties. So when I draw normally, most folks will hold their finger kind of like this, or two fingers. I think mine is kind of this way. So like I bend the second joint on the finger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then if I'm doing like really line heavy patchwork, I go into like a three finger. I actually am more so four, and it's like that. But yeah, I had a fun conversation with a friend about that. We were joking about there should be a Tumblr where there should just be different posts of people holding their pens in different ways, drawing like just for different styles.
I know because it's so different. Like I never really paid attention until I did, and then I
Hmm.
found out that everybody holds it such a different way, and for different jobs as well, for different
Yeah,
like things.
I mean, I think I even noticed that with just now in our day and age. When I grew up, we had to take a typing class and we had to find your home keys and
Uh huh.
work your way up and down. But nowadays, I see so many kids that would talk about like how fast they can type or they compete, and it's like they have just a fluid or an orthodox way of typing that works for them, but they type faster than I could ever dream of typing.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that kind of falls suit with digital art nowadays with kids that actually can have a Cintiq or a Wacom Intuos like right off the bat at an early age and
Yeah,
learning.
that's so special to think
It's
about.
so great. Um, but
Like
yeah, I
when
wonder.
we were younger, we could never even dream that like you could one day draw on a computer screen. It was like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe in 300 years or something. But
Mhm.
it's so special. Like when I first got a bamboo, like an inchuos or something,
Yeah,
it broke my brain. I was like, I can draw
drawing a
on a
circle. I
computer.
remember my
Yes.
circles all came out like this for a while. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I'm drawing a circle in my brain, but it's coming on an oval. I remember the hardest thing for me to learn to draw was on a little tiny Intuos was a straight diagonal line. It always came out like this, and it was just Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Um, yeah, I do have a friend that does really um, clean line anime, like new school anime illustrations, and he works in Photoshop and with an Intuos. I'm like, you draw all of this with an Intuos? I'm like, I don't even know how you do that. Like, I like painting with an Intuos. I don't think I could
Hmm.
do line work with one.
Yeah, me neither. I wish I could. My life would be cheaper. um. Oh, when you animate, in Harmony or anything, do you tend to flip more or use the onion skin more? Or I guess it depends for what you're
Hmm.
doing. But hmm.
I know I flip a lot when I do illustration work.
Uh huh.
Mainly when it comes to faces, I do like the transform tool and sort of reposition and make things in the right place. I definitely do the onion skin probably more than I flip out of the two. If I were to choose, like I can only pick one tool, I would probably pick the onion skin. And I only usually have it one frame. Um,
before and one after.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, oh, that's cool. That's cool to
And then in
know.
lighting animation, I usually turn off the onion skin and just go start to
Uh,
finish.
like you flip your between your frames just
Hmm.
to see the
Yeah.
motion. Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
I think I do the left right. I think I set it to left and right where you jump per drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Which that was a new tech I learned a year or so ago too. I'm like, yay, my life's so much easier. I think it was because of my computer.
Yeah, because like when animating like characters with very close in between, yes, the onion skin is phenomenal. But when you're doing effects that is much more fluid and movement,
Mm.
I too prefer to or tend to flip more between my frames than
Hmm.
uh, looking at the onion skin. Except for arcs, it's really cool for to look at your arcs with the onion skin and stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to doodle while we chat. See how
Yeah,
things go. This high level animation discussion is a treat.
and yeah, little easy questions for to go with Doodle.
Yeah.
um, you work a lot on video games and also short clips such as like trailers or animated bits or music videos. Um, what are some things you enjoy or um, like less about working with shorter media for former shorter formats like that versus like a
Mhm.
full-fledged series?
So I've never had the opportunity to work on a full-fledged serial. I think the longest format would have been probably some of those music videos with Knights of the Light Table.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was another one that was a bit longer, which was that old secret NDA project. And that one was challenging in itself because of the subject matter. But let's see. I think I would probably prefer to work in serial formats because there's always you're always paying attention to budget and time, right? And so
Yep.
you have to find your level of quality that you want to hit and try to keep it as consistent as possible throughout an episode. With of course some really good sakugas thrown in, but you don't want it to be too jarring when that happens.
Yep.
So I've always found that being something that's on my mind. I never try to overextend, which may be to my own detriment. But that also is the case with some of the shorter animations as well. Like the Batman one we did it was only me and the background artist, and we had 6 to 8 weeks to get that knocked out, which went from like a 10-second animation to like a 40-second animation,
Oh boy.
and trying to draw like all of his details on the Batman, it was challenging to try and find a good in between
Mm-hmm.
of quality. And so, like looking back at it, like I love a lot of the shots that I was able to pull off, but all I can think is, man, it would have been great to actually do this shot a different way or add it in a different one because of time. And so it's always it's interesting. There's definitely a mix. Because some of the short animations that we worked on as well, I worked on them part time. The River City Girls intro animation was with with a team of folks that we worked on part time for about 5 months, with animation cleanup help from Future Club, which the folks I worked on Indivisible and Skullgirls, and they helped us get that out the door. But I think our core team, it was myself and I think three other animators that we split the work for, and they all had their own full time gigs and everything too. So it was a really neat sort of part time synergy that we all just kind of worked on our own hours and made sure we hit deadlines, um, which is really cool to do too. I think a lot of folks with animation, they think that it all just kind of happens full time and that these artists are working on this fan animation 8 hours a day, but
I know.
it's it's a lot of folks have to have their daytime job to keep the lights on, and it's something that they work on after hours, and it's a passion project, and animation takes a long time, and
Yeah,
it's
and
it's
it's so common for like you say, like for animators that sometimes we're gonna have our day job that is maybe not our favorite job ever, because
Mhm.
not every project that you're going to work on is going to be your favorite.
Right.
But we yeah, but we often have like one or two side gigs uh on the side that yeah, that we do more for our own interest, or
Mhm.
like
And even still, you get to a point with something that you love, and it becomes work too, and it's
yeah.
you hit that sort of mental burnout as well.
I think for that, like I often advise, especially well, I mean, not only people coming in the industry, but even people that are more vets in the way. I think it's so important, especially from a young age, like just to realize that you're more than just your art. Like it's important to not like just animate or just draw every day. Like get maybe get into like food cooking or rock
Mhm.
climbing, like going outside and actually doing stuff. And now that you mention it, it just reminds me this, like it's um super important. Like, is there some things that you do outside of
Yes.
animation and drawing?
Yeah. Well, I'm a father of three, so that's already enough to keep me pretty
Yeah,
busy.
pretty much.
Uh, it's cool to always be home, always within sort of arm's reach, if the kids ever need anything. So it's my dad worked in the restaurant full time when I was growing up, so I saw him on the weekends, maybe on Sunday, but he would work 12-hour days, like leave in the morning, come back at 10, we were in bed already. So it's good to offer my family that availability of always being here if they just need to ask me something. But it also gets very distracting and
Yeah, it must be.
difficult to. Yeah, I mean you're constantly wearing different hats all the time, outside of like working side projects and stuff too, and then you have your family going on, and so it's a lot to balance out and jump around between. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but for my own personal sanity, it's definitely like having talks with my wife, not about anything work related or work related, and we just sort of talk shop. I do exercise pretty regularly to just kind of de-stress and
Yeah, loosen up and
feel.
stuff.
Yeah, I do boxing, and so that's been a good de-stressor of having a heavy bag and like just kind of closing the door and being in there for like 20-30 minutes and just like think about stuff, and then like afterwards you just kind of feel washed it all away for a moment and can like reset and get back to it fresh.
Yeah. Oh, that's really really interesting. Um, and yeah, very important to focus on only other thing than just your art, because it's for mental health, but also for, I mean, your body's
Yes.
gonna thank you if you take a break from drawing every once in a while.
Taking a break from social media is also a really good one too. It
Oh,
stresses it
that
out.
is so true.
It's very easy to. I remember. I think when I started, when artists started actually putting all their artwork online, like in the 2010s. I remember getting into these inspiration funks where I see something that's incredible, and you just go down this rabbit hole of like, I want to draw like that. I want to animate like that. But it's late and I'm tired and I can't. And you just kind of, you're like restlessly inspired because of all the amazing art that other artists have been sharing. So it's definitely good to take a break from that and step away.
Yeah, and also when it comes, I think when it comes to social media, also it's easy to kind of fall in the trap, and I think we're all culprit of that. But falling in a trap of watching all these amazing art pieces and being like, "Oh, I want to do that! Like, I want to do exactly like that." And artists usually, like, we share our best days on social media. We don't share, like, we share amazing drawing, but we don't share the 100 before that
Oh, for
were
sure.
ugly.
Yeah. A
It takes a
hundred.
100 bad drawing to get a good one.
I think that's what people need to realize too. It's kind of like
Hmm.
those fitness Instagrams where everyone's just like in peak physical form. It's like they don't walk around like that all the time. Like they didn't show you their off days and when they felt bloated and they didn't work out for a week. Like they're only showing you their best. An artist is kind of the same way. We get you get to curate what you show to the world.
Yeah, and yeah, because what we put out there is usually our best days. But yeah, every artist has some bad days sometimes. And I really like what you're drawing now. It's really cool.
Oh,
Um,
thanks. Yeah. Doodles. Maybe I'll make it something there. The brush pen tool in Toon is definitely one of the big things to work with. I think India was telling me she likes doing a lot of her sketch work in Storyboard Pro because she's so used to the tool sets now.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, I was like, I'll pop into one of their streams and she's like doing a character concept, but it's like on the Toon Boom Storyboard Pro timeline. I'm like, what the heck are you?
Well, it's interesting also to see that because yes, like storyboard and Harmony are mainly storyboard and animation software, but yeah, more and more people are just using it also to do like their design work or just like sketches or exploration. I know a fair few people that are gonna sketch their idea in Harmony and then go paint it in another software to apply
Oh,
like
interesting.
paint and all that.
But they, you think they'd
Um,
also do their line work in? I guess that also makes sense too.
yeah,
You just
very often because there's something with like the the textured vector brush, like you can draw with them. It's easier to maybe like move an eye around instead of trying to crop it with like a selection tool,
yeah.
being to move a few things like that. So
Yeah, having
I
the
like to
lasso tool
mm-hmm.
like on this controller is incredibly quick and easy. I don't have to go to transform like you said or a selection tool.
Yeah.
It's like you can hit it.
So like to draw and make the sketch and make the cleanup, uh it's so fluid and easy to do in Harmony or Storyboard Pro. So usually they're gonna do like the sketches there and then export them um, with transparency and just go ahead and paint them. Also like you mentioned for the indexed color, if you're doing like character design, I guess it's also easier to just play with these colors and change them with the ID and all that. So
Hmm.
yeah, pretty flexible.
Yeah.
Can you tell
Uh,
us a little bit about the character you're drawing?
oh yeah, this is Space Maria.
Yeah.
She's like an amalgam of a bunch of stuff that I liked growing up, and it was in creating her. I think it started off as just like her name was Fluffy haired girl, and and
For
I just
real?
didn't have it. Yeah, it just Fluffy because I just wanted to draw big hair. And I remember wanting to like draw it to a point where it's like it would be she would look like an anime that you thought you saw growing up, but it didn't exist. So that's kind of been the approach. I think it kind of took off. I don't know if there's a lot of artists working on this style back when I started. I think it was like 2018 or 2017. Um, and now it's
Oh,
definitely like a
I thought
really
it was
cool
much
trend.
older than that.
No, I think 2017 is when I started. I have to go back and like go down the Twitter timeline and see how long ago it was. Yeah, maybe. I think it was. It could have been sooner. I don't remember. It's been a long time.
And I know now you have your own studio, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are looking at the cool things you output from there. And it's so far it's really much with the your favorite style that you're doing. And so there's this studio work, and you also do work for like the Game Grumps. And is there because many people ask you different jobs for their similar style, but is there some differences and similarities between all these different contracts, like some specifications in the style that you change for one or the other?
Yeah. So I guess some easy ones are they just want it in my style, which is a weird question sometimes because as an artist you feel your style is always kind of changing, and then you do something and put it out there, and they're like, no, not like that. That's great, but I want it like this style, like your style. It's like, oh, you mean
I
that?
guess they
Okay,
would
cool.
show you your like they could show you this image that you just drew and be like, yeah, can you
Right.
push it toward that direction? I guess having
Mm.
images to show must be helpful in a style
Yes.
discussion.
Yeah, definitely so. Um, and yeah, like so, like the River City Girls thing was definitely like in my style, and I tried to make it. kind of be a blend of um, artist Kenichi Sonoda's style, which blends in with mine, and wanted to call back to a little bit of like the Yu Yu Hakusho anime back in the day. So it was funny because a lot of folks thought that Kunio looked like, uh, gosh, I forgot his name, big redhead guy from Yu Yu. Like it's him. Like, not exactly, but yes, that's what I was aiming for. Um, yeah, it varies between gigs. I don't know. It's interesting because most gigs that I get off, you know, I guess like Twitter DMs and stuff are leaning towards like an '80s '90s anime style, um, but it's not. They're not all the same. There's a lot of nuances, right? Like I can think about like
Mm-hmm.
3 to 5 different retro anime animators and artists that do work, but a lot of their work falls into sort of like that Sailor Moon clamp style from the '80s and '90s,
Uh-huh.
which is not really the style that I like to draw, or one that comes out too naturally. Um, I never like drawing eyes that big. I think I always kind of keep them kind of small, but that's just like my own personal thing. Yeah.
And if you were to clean up that drawing a little bit, do you have a favorite brush that you would use? Because there's like dry ballpoint, there's
Mm.
pipe cleaner that like everybody tends to have their favorites, or maybe you have your own. Who knows?
Yeah, so I definitely have my own. Well, it's not my own. It's definitely, it was the line tool that we used in Starlight Brigade. Um, it was called Starlight Inks.
And it's available for free online. We can put a link in the chat
Yeah, yeah,
of
it's great. I don't know
the
how
video.
India put it together, but it has a bit of a transparency. It's interesting because I've had some artists work with the same tool and use this, and so like they'll come back and they'll give me their line work and it's solid. I don't think I can really do it that solid. So so whenever I would do it, I like kind of sketching it in, but there always ends up being a little bit of transparency. And then I get some other cleanup artists and their line works deep, really really black, and I'm curious as to how do you get it that dark. Um, the good thing about using this one is that it has like a pencily kind of feel, and so it's imperfect. I think animation should try to retain a little bit of its imperfections, just to kind of emulate the old cell style
Mm-hmm.
of work. Um, like old cell animation was never intended for 4K Blu-rays and streaming. It was always for the television and VHS and shown on film in a theater. And so
Yeah.
there's always like a lot of the grit gets lost in the photography. Um, and so I think like for me personally nowadays when I watch new animation, it always feels too clean. Line work is too thin for my taste, and so it just feels a little too sterile. I was talking with Ben Fiqua at Lizard Cube, who's an incredible art director and animator, and he has a signature style of drawing really thick, brushy lines, and he does all his animation. I think he's starting to switch over to Toon Boom, so yay! Um,
Yay!
but he was working in Photoshop, and we had this discussion, and it comes important for game design too. That he likes drawing thick lines because he says that I don't think drawing should be too clean or too perfect, especially in animation. There's more live with a little bit of character and integrity. Just seeing like lines kind of have a little bit of grit, and so for in games like that he's made with Wonder Boy and Streets of Rage, his character models have very bold line work. And so for a character that's sized out, if this box was our screen, the character is going to be like only this take up this much space on the screen. Like this line would be too thin to draw a character and animate them because if you're looking at it on a smaller screen, that the detail kind of disappears. So I think his line work ends up being like nice, thick, bold lines that he curates, so you can see these details from like far away and can still make out what the character's face looks like. And so,
Yeah, that makes sense. So many different styles for the same thing.
yes,
And I think
definitely.
that's sometimes what people don't really realize. They're like, "Oh, so you draw animes? Can you draw this?" I'm like, "No, well, I mean,
I
animes is
could,
such a
but
wide thing."
mhm.
Um, yeah, so very it's interesting talk. Thank you so much again for coming over.
Yeah.
And I like to close all our little talks with the same question. Because when artists, as artists, we are, yes, we draw, but like, it comes from somewhere. Like, we have, we have feelings. We're humans. And sometimes when you try to draw, it just works. And sometimes when you're trying to do anything, it just doesn't. And that's just part of life. And
Mm.
it's something that we as artists and human beings like have to deal with. So, when you have a day that it just really doesn't work, um, what do you do? Do you like take a walk? Do you have a way to just like try to push through a certain part of it or something? What do you do?
Mm. That's a tough one because I'm definitely still victim to this now. Yeah, after even drawing for over a decade.
Yeah, because people think that when we are professional, like they see our stuff on Twitter, on YouTube, they're like, "Oh, well, these people draw all the time and it always goes well. I want to be like them." I'm like, "Well,
Yeah,
newsflash, we also experience
it's
these
all
episodes."
relative, definitely. And it's like you said, like on social media, it's definitely a curated thing. Um, they're not gonna share something that they don't feel comfortable with, or they do feel comfortable with it, and they want to show it to like, hey, I'm struggling too. Um, uh, geez, rough days. It's for work. You definitely do have to power through it. It does get very difficult when you have to create and concept something from a blank canvas with really rough art block or just I mean, and even art block in itself is already very there's varying degrees, right? Like there's a lack of you can't think of something creative, and then there's like a skill version of that where it's like I can't draw a hand today, and I don't know why I can't draw a hand today. And it's driving me
Yeah, because
nuts.
art blocks sometimes people think it's just, oh, I have no idea. Well, I will give you an idea. Like it's not exactly that. It's just like you could have an idea, but each time you draw it,
It's
it's
wrong.
just not. Yeah, it's not the idea. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I definitely would say if you're doing for work, try your best to power through it. Um, and like you said, take a walk, like step away from it for a second, maybe take a break if you can afford it at the time. Just try your best to like reset yourself. But I've definitely had to power through a few different deadlines and
Hmm.
projects, regardless of how I felt. And if you're having to do that, I mean, I hate to say it, that's kind of a good sign that you're doing work, right? Like it's no longer you get to a point in any kind of craft where it's like you have to push past the fun melancholy of it, then and you have to like get into like you have to start grinding a little bit, right? You have to like grind to level up. I always told myself whenever I hit a struggle with my art or I feel like it's not there, it's like you're like at the cusp of leveling up. You just need to get a little bit more EXP and then you cross and then you're like, I got it.
Yeah,
And
then
then
it works fine. It's amazing until you hit the other.
the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're close to the next level, you're like, I hate everything. But then it
Yep.
gets better. So yeah, just remember it's gonna get better, people. It will.
Yep. And for folks that are friends with artists, yeah, your artist friends are always going to be going through that. And they're probably not looking for you to compliment them or tell them their work is good. They just need some ears to vent these personal struggles to.
We know it's temporary, but hear us out.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to have friends that'll listen too. I definitely find folks that roll in the same circles, or even friends that aren't in the same circles, to give yourself a fresh take and yeah, get it out of your head, and just remember that it's only temporary. It'll get better. Um, as hard as that is, easier said than done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, then again, thank you so much for coming over um, and sharing your wisdom in your nice, pretty pictures.
thanks.
And yeah, until next time, have a
Yeah,
wonderful day.
thank you. It was great to
And
be here.
yeah, bye bye, everyone.
Bye.